Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you all my Game of Thrones Season 3 expectations video right here on Otaku Assemble Weekly. And finally, here to bring you all my expectations and predictions for the upcoming season of Game of Thrones. Now, I want to preamble this video by stating that my expectations for this season have already been dampened. And that's due to two things. The first being that I've already been spoiled to a major event that I believe is going to occur towards the end of this season. That happened back in 2011, right around the time that season 1 was wrapping up. And that's the main reason why I turned off all the comments on all of my Game of Thrones reviews. And that will continue as long as I'm doing those reviews because of that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I've recently been linked to a list of all the cast members for season 3. And I've noticed that there are some characters that I was hoping to see in this season that don't appear. Now, I don't know if that is a full list because I've recently seen the trailer, and there's a scene in the trailer with Yara, Theon's sister, and she's not on that list. So I don't know if that's an incomplete list or not, or maybe her scene in the trailers, maybe that's just a cameo. But yeah, I was a little bit disappointed with what I saw from that cast list because it seems like a very small cast, much smaller than the previous 2 seasons, and so yeah, that kind of dampened my expectations for this season. So keep those two things in mind as I'm discussing things throughout this video. Now, so with that being said, just recently seen the first 2 trailers and, like I said, that list of cast members. And that's mainly because during the off season, when Game of Thrones is not airing, I don't really rewatch Game of Thrones. I might catch an episode once in a blue moon, but I don't rewatch the series during the off season. I usually don't. And I keep away from all news, all casting, all promotion, all that jazz, you know, press conferences, all that type of stuff. I keep away from all that type of stuff. I just want to sit down and watch my show when the new episodes air. That's it. So to familiarize myself and to pretty much start getting a couple of things to talk about, I went and I watched the first 2 trailers, and I read that casting list probably about 5 minutes before I did this video. And so pretty much I got a couple of thoughts, but honestly, not as much stuff, not in the same manner of excitement that I was for season 2. And that's just because of the way this story's panning out. First and foremost, I'm not as hopeful for, good old Team Stark as I have been in the past. That's a losing team. That does not mean I'm switching teams. Hell no. Stark for life. I wreck House Stark. But let's face it, that's a losing team. So I'm not very hopeful for their cause. And I'm not very hopeful for Stannis' fight. I've said from Jump Street I thought that was going to end badly, and I stand by that decision. And then, like I said, just this whole idea that I don't think we're going to see a bunch of new characters that I don't think we're going to see a bunch of characters that they've already referenced in the series, and I don't think there's going to be those many new additions to this season. So yeah, not really that excited about it. At this point in time, it's just a matter of seeing things play out that they've already set up. That's it. That's pretty much it. Now, this is going to be based off of the 3rd book in A Song of Ice and Fire, which is titled A Storm of Swords. With that title, I'm expecting season 3 and also season 4, because I believe they're splitting up the 3rd book into 2 seasons. I'm expecting the bulk of these seasons to focus on the war. I can only imagine if the title of your book is called A Storm of Swords, that would what's the term I'm looking for? That would give this sense that it's going to focus primarily on warfare. I mean, is it safe enough to assume that? Is it safe enough to assume that? So, if the first book of Game of Thrones was supposed to represent, you know, this political game, this political intrigue that is at play with all the lords of Westeros, and then the second book, A Clash of Kings, is supposed to talk about the dissension amongst the lords, about all of those who want to proclaim themselves kings, and about the war to come, then I think A Storm of Swords is supposed to focus on the war itself. And if that's the case, then like I said, it's just a matter of seeing things play out that they've already been building up for. So what I'm talking about is the main war between the Starks and the Lannisters will continue, or rather the North and the Lannisters will continue. Stannis and his campaign to get the Iron Throne, that will continue. Mance Rayder gathering his forces for marching on the wall, that will continue. Outside of those, and then of course Daenerys trying to get her hands on an army so that she can sell to Westeros, that will continue. Outside of those 4 main conflicts, I don't see any other conflict other than those main 4 popping up. And I think that any other house that arises within the story at this point in time is only going to coincide with one of those 4 conflicts. Because I just don't see where they would be able to fit any other conflict in. So what I'm talking about is things like taking consideration, okay, like the Tyrells, for an example. We know they've aligned themselves with the Lannisters, so that's where they fit in. And the Greyjoys, I think at some point in time, is going to align themselves with one of those other bigger houses. So I think that's where they're going to fit in. And I think it's just a matter of time. Oh, also, we know that House Martell, who I don't think are going to appear in this season, and that's actually one of the letdowns for me already, is I don't think they're going to appear in this season, which kind of sucks. But we know that that they're going to eventually align themselves with House Lannister because of the marriage that Tyrion orchestrated in last season. We know, so pretty much that's what I'm saying. Things of that nature that's what's going to occur, or what I expect to occur. Now, expectations as far as the characters themselves. Pretty much, I just expect them to be maintaining the status quo, meaning I expect their goals in last season to continue on throughout this season. So when we're talking about the Starks, I expect Robb to keep fighting the war. I do expect that his relationship with Catelyn is probably going to be strained at the beginning of the season, but I think at some point in time they'll remedy that. They'll get back on good terms eventually. I just don't see that happening at season's open. I think Arya is going to I think Arya is going to continue with what her goal was after she left Harrenhal, and that's pretty much regroup with Robb. I think Bran and Rickon are going to stay in the North. I don't really know where else they could go. And that option about them heading towards Castle Black, that's still on the table, so they could do that. But I don't see them heading south no time soon. And Sansa, I think she's going to stay in King's Landing based solely on the fact that she doesn't have a way out. It's not like she's going to regroup with somebody else or to leave with somebody else. We know that Sandor made her the offer to leave with him, and she turned down his offer. So how else would she leave, and why else would she leave? I just don't see that happening. And also, I don't know what her role in this season is supposed to be. And that's because in one of the trailers, we see a scene with her walking hand in hand with Joffrey, but we know that Joffrey's already agreed to marry Marjorie. So what is Sansa supposed to be doing? And that kind of coincides with my thoughts on Sansa's character in last season. She's the only one out of the Starks that does not have a set goal, an objective goal at hand. Do you see what I'm saying? I've already listed all the other Starks' goals. Hers is just being there. And so that's why my expectations for her are just being there. I don't expect her to do or accomplish very much of anything. Which is, hey, if my expectations for her are already that low, that just means if she does do something unexpected, hey, that just raises the bar on her. What I'm saying is the bar for Sansa can't really get much lower, so she can only go up from here on out, is what I'm thinking. Unless she just is there. You know, like Roz, she's just there. So, yeah. Now the Lannisters, and this is what confuses me the most. Okay, we know that, I'm going to start off with Jaime. We know that Jaime is heading back to King's Landing. I believe he's headed towards King's Landing. I don't think he's headed towards Casterly Rock or any of their allies, because I believe him and Brienne are on the King's Road. So that's where he's headed. But I don't think he'll get there in this season. I think Jaime is going to spend the majority of this season on the King's Road. And if he does make it to King's Landing, I think that'll be like in the later half. So I'm thinking episodes 7 through 10, possibly. Cersei. I think that this will be the season where Cersei is kind of getting pushed out, because Joffrey's gotten to the point now where he doesn't want his mom around, and we've seen throughout season 2, little by little by little, episode by episode, she is losing her control over Joffrey. We already had Tyrion there as Hand, and now Tywin's back as Hand. So, especially now that Tywin's back, and he's going to be the one pretty much advising Joffrey from here on out, that's all the more reason why Cersei will... Oh, also consider this. Joffrey's getting married soon. So, his wife is going to become the new queen. So now Cersei's going to kind of lose her title, if you will. So I think season 3 is going to be her slow, you know, moving out of that position of power. Since I brought up, let me just go ahead and talk about Tywin just briefly. Part of me wants to think that Tywin is not going to stick around in King's Landing. Because if Tywin is spending all his time in the Red Keep, who's commanding his armies on the field? That's the question I want to pose. And this is where I'm going to talk about Tyrion, because here's my thing. We had Tyrion as Hand and Tywin as Commander in season 2. Are those roles supposed to switch in season 3, where Tywin's going to be Hand and he's going to send Tyrion out into the field? Because I don't see how Tywin and Tyrion are supposed to coexist in King's Landing. And that's not because they're going to be fighting each other for power. It's the exact opposite. Those are both Lannister men with great intellectual talent. You see what I'm saying? They are both great strategic masterminds. And so what I'm saying is, why would both of those people be in the same location? They aren't needed in the same location. One should be on the field, one should be in the keep. So, are they going to swap places? Is Tywin going to just stick around for a little bit and then leave? What is Tyrion supposed to do now that his dad's back in King's Landing? Now that his dad has taken up the position that he bestowed on Tyrion in the previous season? What is he supposed to do? So that has to get resolved. And I'm hoping it gets resolved relatively quickly. Like I said, it's not because there is a struggle for power amongst Tywin and his son. It's because they fulfill somewhat of the same roles and they aren't needed in the same place. Yeah, so that's it on the Lannister part. Now, there's only one Baratheon left, and that's Stannis. I think for the most part, that's, like I said, Stannis is just going to finish out his campaign. I don't know where he can do that. He's failed at Blackwater. He's failed to take King's Landing. Is he planning on regrouping, getting another army, and heading back there? Because now, if memory serves me correctly, the main force is now back home. Well, not back home. I said home. For the Lannisters, home would be Casterly Rock. But last I checked, Tywin brought a lot of men to King's Landing with him. And now the Tyrells are with him. So Stannis is now more outnumbered and outmatched than he's ever been before. And let's face it, he can't get the Iron Throne without taking King's Landing. And there's no way he's going to be able to convince them to leave King's Landing in order to face him out in the open field. I don't see how that's going to be possible. The only thing I could even practically even think that Stannis could do is if he teams up with Balon Greyjoy. Because Balon has a better navy than Stannis does. And I think he has a navy that will even rival the Lannister forces. That's the only possible way I could see that working. But what's the chances that Stannis is going to try and attack from the sea again? I think relatively low. I think that Melisandre will continue whispering in his ear. And I stand by what I said about Melisandre and Stannis before. That woman is going to be Stannis' downfall. She is going to be the harbinger of his death. That's how it's going to. If he dies by somebody else's sword, it's going to be because Melisandre put him in that position. I stand by that decision. Because they've already set that up so much that for them to just abandon it, I'm gonna be like, what the fuck? So that's what I think is going to happen with that. Let me see. Is there anybody else I want to talk about? Oh, the Tyrells. I'm curious. What's going to be their role in this season? We saw that they teamed up with the Lannisters, but does that mean that they've necessarily bent a knee to the Lannisters? Are they just going to pretty much oh no, there it goes, bam, there it goes right there. I forgot. I've been talking about what Stannis is going to do this whole time. Fucking Loras has a goddamn vendetta out against Stannis. Okay, well, bam, that solves that problem. Stannis is going to be trying to go after the Iron Throne, but fucking the Tyrells are going to be blocking him at every chance he gets. So yeah, that's what Stannis is going to be doing this season, fighting off the Tyrells. And yeah, and Loras is out for blood. He wants Stannis' head. So yeah, but here's my thing. Okay, all right, we know what Loras. Okay, that's what Loras is going to be doing. All right. I'm curious. We know that Marjorie is in King's Landing and she's supposed to be marrying Joffrey, right? I'm going to put air quotes around that because I just don't know. I think that, remember what I said about Cersei being kind of forced out? I think that's going to put her at ends with Marjorie. And I'm actually looking forward to that because those characters are so much alike. Well, they're so much alike in terms of ambition and in terms of how they play the game. But I think their demeanors are a bit different. Cersei, for her lack of trying, Cersei, for all her trying, she really does wear her emotions on her sleeves. She does. You know, she tries to put up the front, but that's all it is a front. Whereas Marjorie, I think, is actually a little bit smarter than that. I think she's more clever than Cersei is. So it's going to be kind of interesting seeing how those two women have to deal with one another. Because let's face it, they're both fighting for the same position. Cersei, she wants to remain queen, and Marjorie wants to be queen. So now let me see who else I want to talk about. I don't care what Littlefinger's gonna do. I don't really care what his character's gonna do. He's a sniveling, conniving little bastard, and I hope he just gets murked. And Varys, I think, is just going to be doing what he's been doing. You know, I find Varys more and more interesting because he does, especially after rewatching season 2, he does seem to just be completely neutral. Varys seems to bounce around. Varys seems to bounce in between power players, but he never really seems to choose one side. And whenever he does seem to choose a side, it's not because he agrees with that side, it's because that's the side that appears to be most likely to win at that point in time. So you see what I'm saying? Varys doesn't seem, I'm rocking because this seems to be Varys' demeanor. He doesn't seem to ever really choose a side or to affiliate himself with anybody. He's just kind of like he's kind of just like a line on a wheat he's kind of like a floater on a fishing line. He just kind of bobs there. He doesn't dip. You see what I'm saying? He just kind of bounces there. So I think he's just going to keep doing that. That's what I'm expecting him to do. And I'm gonna spend these last couple of moments to talk about the two main characters I have yet to mention, which are Jon Snow and Daenerys. And that's because my thoughts on those characters, the role that they continue to play in this story, is the same thing. They are, and I don't know if anyone's ever coined this term before, but to coin the term, they are the vehicles of exploration. And this is what I mean. Jon and Daenerys are at extreme ends of the map, and they are engaged in conflicts that are completely independent of the main conflict of the story. So the role that their characters play, they are the characters through which we see the outside world through. We see the world beyond the wall through Jon and the rest of the Night's Watch. We see the towns and cities and cultures and tribes across the Narrow Sea through Daenerys. So that's why I call them vehicles of exploration. They're our characters outside of the main conflict, outside of the Seven Kingdoms. And so my expectations on Jon, I think they're pretty much the same that I mentioned at the end in my my season 2 episode 10 review. I think that Jon is going to infiltrate Mance Rayder's compound, and he's actually going to kind of rise through the ranks of the wildlings of Mance Rayder's forces. And I think in time, Jon is actually going to or at least I hope that his character is going to question, at some point in time, he's going to question his affiliation, whose side he's actually on. You know, we saw that Jon had to detach himself from the Seven Kingdoms when he chose not to go back to fight alongside Robb. He chose the Night's Watch. And I think the more he indulges himself in the wildlings and in their culture and in their way of life, because remember, those are the descendants of the first men. Those are, for all intent and purpose, those are his cousins. So I think that taking that in consideration, the fact that with them, among the wildlings, he's not a bastard. Remember that. He keeps his name, but with them, he's not a bastard. Like he would have been with the civilized people south of the wall. You know, bastard Snow. He's not that with the wildlings. And I think he's going to find it. Now, yeah, he is a crow. But I think by the time he, what's the term I'm looking for? Abandons, neglects that title, I think eventually he'll come to find a place amongst the wildlings. And then he'll have to choose, because he will have the what is called the chance for change, the opportunity for change, and he'll have to make that decision. He'll have to come to terms with that eventually. And if they don't, I mean, if that never happens in this series, then that's just a huge fucking waste of that character's potential. Just a huge fucking waste. And with Daenerys, I think the funny thing is, one thing I've noticed about Daenerys, and I don't know if I made this comment about her character before, but Daenerys seems to be Daenerys really does seem to be the rookie in a Game of Thrones. And this is what I mean. It seems like Daenerys is the character who has to learn how to play the game through all these hard lessons. You know, she's already had to learn hard lessons of loyalty, of trust, of dependency, of, well, various lessons on commanding a position of power. But kind of in the same way how Jon has. Kind of in that same way where Jon has to learn these things, so has Daenerys. Except that Jon actually has mentors, whereas Daenerys has had to learn them the hard way. Not necessarily the hard way. Ned learned the hard way. But Daenerys is having to learn these things. You know, she's losing people close to her, and she keeps finding herself in positions of vulnerability and positions where she's been taken advantage of. And so every lesson is making her a little bit wiser, but I think also a little bit harder. And so in this season, I'm expecting that same thing to happen. I'm hoping that we do get a wiser Daenerys. Now, granted, a level of naivety still has to be there for her character to continue along those lines of learning these hard lessons. But what I'm saying is, I'm hoping that she's taken what's happened to her in the previous 2 seasons, and she's learned from that and taken it all in stride. So, like we've seen, they've shown countless scenes in the trailers with her amongst this army, whether that's her army or someone else's army, or an army that she conquers, or an army that she buys. We don't know that yet, but we've seen her amongst an army, and we have seen her on ships, and it looks like the dragons are growing. They look like the size of dogs by now. So I think what I'm hoping for is that this is the season that teaches Daenerys about commanding power. That this is the season where she is given the most power, more than the Khaleesi. Because remember, when she was a Khaleesi, that position of power was completely dependent on Drogo. So it was still dependent on a man. Now I'm hoping that she gets a taste of power with herself. And so that's pretty much going to wrap up my expectations video for season 3. Like I said, we're going to have to see how this whole thing pans out. And with that being said, later this week, Game of Thrones podcast for all of my Game of Thrones fans. I'm doing a podcast being uploaded Saturday night. Then my review Sunday night of season 3, episode 1. And then my Vikings episode review is going to be up on Monday night. And with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, signing off. And until next time, peace.